Powerful human, my mother, has been taken, save her. He's a living weapon who found his purpose. Marcus was a soldier, but he was unlike any other. Born from a top-secret program, he was not a regular human. He had been designed, created, and enhanced to be a living weapon, stronger, faster, and more lethal than anyone could imagine. His body had been modified with advanced technology, and his mind was trained to be focused only on one thing: combat. For years, Marcus served on the front lines of countless battles. He had fought against enemies from across the galaxy, his missions always ending with victory. He didn't question his purpose. His only goal was to win, but something inside him felt empty. He had been trained to fight and to kill, but he had never been asked if that was what he wanted. He had never been given a choice. His purpose was clear, but his heart was not. He was a weapon, a tool for war. That was how he had always seen himself. Then one day, everything changed. Marcus sat alone in a small room aboard the military transport ship. The hum of the engines was the only sound that filled the silence. He had just returned from a mission, and as usual, there was little to do but wait for the next order. His mind wandered as he stared out the small, narrow window. The stars outside seemed so far away, just like his own sense of belonging. For a brief moment, he wondered if there was more to life than this, but no answer came. That was when the door slid open and a figure stepped inside. It was a woman, a young alien princess, dressed in elaborate robes that shimmered under the ship's light. Her long black hair flowed like a river, and her eyes gleamed with determination. Marcus stood up immediately, his training kicking in. He didn't know who she was or why she was here, but he knew better than to ignore a visitor, especially one who seemed so important. He offered a brief salute. The princess smiled at him, though there was sadness in her eyes. "You are Marcus, the human soldier, the one they say is the perfect weapon," she said softly. Marcus nodded. He had heard those words before, but they always sounded strange to him. He had never asked for this title. "Yes," he replied, his voice flat and emotionless. "I need your help," she said, her voice trembling just slightly. "My mother, the queen of my people, has been taken by a ruthless warlord. I have no one else to turn to. I've been told you are the only one who can save her." Marcus's mind processed her words quickly. He had heard of warlords who took what they wanted without hesitation, crushing entire civilizations in their wake. But this was different. This was not just a mission for a simple victory. This was personal. "You want me to rescue your queen," Marcus said, his voice colder than before. "I don't do rescue missions. I fight, I destroy." "I know," she said, her eyes filled with a mixture of fear and hope. "But you are more than just a soldier. I believe you have the strength to save her. You are not just a weapon, I can feel it. There is something else inside you. Please, Marcus, please help me." Her words hit him harder than he expected. In that moment, Marcus felt a strange tug in his chest, a flicker of something he had never allowed himself to feel before: compassion. He had always seen himself as a weapon, a tool. But was he truly nothing more than that? "I've been trained for war," Marcus replied, his voice low. "That's all I know. I don't know how to rescue anyone. I don't know how to save." "I know it's hard," the princess said, "but you're not alone in this. I will be with you. Together we can do this. Please, Marcus. My mother's life depends on it." The princess's plea echoed in his mind as she left the room. Marcus was left alone again, but this time something inside him was different. He had always lived for battle, for the thrill of victory. But now the thought of saving someone, the thought of making a difference in a way he had never thought possible, began to linger in his mind. That night, Marcus lay in his bunk, staring at the ceiling. The sounds of the ship seemed distant, almost like a dream. He couldn't stop thinking about the princess and her mother. It wasn't just the mission that weighed on him, it was the question of who he truly was. Was he just a weapon, or was he something more? Could he change? Could he make a choice to fight for something greater than just winning a battle? The next morning, when the ship arrived at their destination, a distant planet at the edge of known space, Marcus made his decision. He would help the princess. He would go after the warlord. It wasn't just a mission for him anymore. It was a chance to prove that he was more than just a soldier. It was a chance to find out who he really was. As the team prepared to depart, Marcus walked up to the princess, who was waiting anxiously by the airlock. She looked at him, her face filled with gratitude and concern. "You've decided?" she asked. Marcus nodded. "I'm in. Let's get your mother back." The princess smiled, a small but genuine smile. "Thank you," she whispered. "You won't regret this." As Marcus followed her onto the transport ship, he felt a sense of purpose that he had never felt before. This wasn't just about fighting. It wasn't about being the strongest, the most skilled, or the most dangerous. It was about something far more important, protecting someone who needed him and, in turn, discovering who he could be outside of the battlefield. For the first time, Marcus wasn't just a weapon. He was something else, a protector. And that realization filled him with a new kind of strength. He didn't know how the mission would end, but he knew this. He was no longer just a soldier. He had a new purpose, and for the first time in his life, he was ready to face it head-on. The air was thick with tension as Marcus and the princess, Nia, stood on the transport ship, preparing for their mission. The planet they were about to land on was known for its hostile terrain and its dark reputation. The warlord who had taken Nia's mother ruled this land with an iron fist, using fear and violence to maintain control. No one dared to defy him. Marcus had heard stories about the warlord's brutality, and as they approached the planet, he knew the danger that lay ahead. "Are you sure this is the right place?" Marcus asked, his voice low. His eyes scanned the monitors, trying to get a sense of what awaited them below. Nia stood beside him, her gaze fixed on the planet's surface. "Yes," she said, her voice steady but filled with determination. "This is where they're holding her. I can feel it." Marcus nodded. He could see the strength in Nia's eyes, despite the fear she must have been feeling. She was no soldier. She had never seen the kind of violence Marcus had experienced, but her resolve was strong, and that strength was something Marcus respected. In a way, he admired her courage. "All right, then, we land and we find your mother," Marcus said. His voice had a calm certainty that masked the storm of thoughts racing through his mind. He was ready for this. He had fought in battles before, but this mission was different. This wasn't about fighting for a cause or a government. It was about saving someone who had been lost and left behind. As the ship descended, the terrain below became visible: rugged mountains, dry plains, and cities surrounded by walls and fortresses. The planet was a place where life had to fight to survive, a harsh world that had been molded by endless war. Marcus had never been to a planet like this before. Every part of him was trained for combat, but there was something unsettling about the environment they were entering. It felt different than anything he had experienced. "We'll be landing in a few minutes," Nia said, her voice tinged with anxiety. Marcus turned to her, giving her a reassuring look. "Stay close," he said. "We'll get through this." The ship touched down on a barren field, and the landing ramp lowered. Marcus and Nia stepped out into the harsh sunlight, the heat of the planet's surface hitting them immediately. Dust kicked up as they made their way through the open field, the sound of their boots crunching against the dry ground. Nia held a small device in her hand that would guide them to the warlord's fortress. "Follow me," Nia said, her voice steady despite the situation. "I know where we need to go." Marcus followed her, keeping a watchful eye on their surroundings. The air smelled of dust and metal, a scent he had grown accustomed to after years of war. He stayed alert, his enhanced senses constantly scanning for any sign of danger. The last thing he wanted was to be caught off guard. This mission wasn't just about fighting, it was about protecting Nia and making sure her mother was safe. As they made their way deeper into the territory, the landscape became more desolate. The buildings grew taller, their broken windows and shattered walls telling the story of a place that had been scarred by war for years. The people here were tough, hardened by the constant battles that raged around them. Some of them watched Marcus and Nia as they passed, their eyes filled with suspicion and fear. It was clear that outsiders weren't welcome in this part of the world. "We're getting closer," Nia said, her voice barely above a whisper. Marcus nodded, his focus never wavering. He could feel the tension in the air, the anticipation building as they approached the warlord's fortress. They passed through a small village, its streets lined with makeshift homes and broken-down vehicles. The people here seemed to avoid them, their eyes glancing at Marcus and Nia before quickly looking away. Finally, they reached the gates of the fortress. It was a massive structure, built from stone and metal, with high walls and armed guards standing watch. Marcus's eyes narrowed as he studied the layout. This would not be an easy place to infiltrate, but he was ready. Nia stopped at the gates, her device glowing. "This is it," she said, her voice shaking slightly. "This is where they're holding my mother." Marcus looked down at her, his expression softening. "We're going to get her back," he said. "Stay behind me." Nia nodded, though her hands clenched at her sides. She was nervous, but her determination was stronger than her fear. She trusted Marcus, and she was ready to face whatever lay ahead. The gates of the fortress creaked open, and Marcus led the way. Inside, the fortress was cold and dark, the walls lined with flickering lights and heavy machinery. The air smelled of oil and metal, a familiar scent to Marcus. As they moved deeper into the fortress, the sounds of distant voices and machinery grew louder. "Where is she?" Marcus asked, his voice low and steady. "Through the next door," Nia replied, pointing ahead. "That's where they're holding her." They approached the door, and Marcus motioned for Nia to stay behind him. He could hear footsteps approaching, and he tensed, preparing for a fight. But before they could make a move, a group of heavily armed soldiers appeared from around the corner. They stopped in their tracks when they saw Marcus. "Hold it!" one of the soldiers shouted. He raised his weapon, aiming it directly at Marcus. "What are you doing here?" Marcus didn't hesitate. His training kicked in immediately, and within seconds, the soldiers were disarmed and incapacitated. They didn't stand a chance against someone like Marcus. He moved with precision, his enhanced reflexes making him faster than any normal human. Nia watched in awe as Marcus handled the soldiers with ease. She had never seen anything like it, his strength, his speed, his control. He was a force to be reckoned with, and she realized for the first time how powerful he truly was. "Let's move," Marcus said, turning to Nia. They continued through the fortress, their pace quickening as they approached the chamber where Nia's mother was being held. The walls seemed to close in around them as they neared the final door. Nia could feel her heart pounding in her chest. She didn't know what to expect, but she knew that they were close to rescuing her mother. They reached the door, and Marcus motioned for Nia to stay behind him. He pushed the door open, and inside they found what they were looking for, the Queen, Nia's mother, bound and unconscious but alive. Nia rushed to her mother's side, her hands trembling as she gently touched the Queen's face. "Mom," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I'm here. We're going to get you out of here." Marcus stood guard, his eyes scanning the room for any signs of danger. The mission wasn't over yet, but they had done it. They had found the Queen, and they had made it this far. As Nia helped her mother to her feet, she turned to Marcus. "Thank you," she said, her voice filled with gratitude. "I couldn't have done this without you." Marcus nodded, his face calm. "We're not done yet. We need to get out of here." With the Queen safe, Marcus led them back through the fortress, ready to face whatever came next. This was just the beginning, but Marcus knew one thing for sure. He had found a new purpose. He wasn't just a weapon. He was someone who could make a difference. The fortress had become a maze. As Marcus, Nia, and the Queen moved through the dark halls, the oppressive silence weighed heavily on them. Every corner they turned seemed to hide more danger. The heavy clanking of machinery echoed through the stone walls, but there was no sign of any more soldiers. It was as though the whole place had become a ghost town, abandoned in the wake of their escape. Marcus, though focused and steady, could sense the tension in the air. He had expected a fight. He had prepared for it. But there was something unsettling about the quiet. The warlord surely would not allow them to leave without a fight. It was only a matter of time before more forces arrived. Nia walked closely beside her mother, her hand gently resting on the Queen's arm. Her mother, still weak but alive, had regained some strength. She had whispered a few words of gratitude when Nia first reached her, but now she was focused on getting out of the fortress safely. "We have to be quick," Marcus said quietly, his voice low and controlled. His eyes scanned their surroundings, alert for any movement. "We need to make it to the exit before they regroup." Nia nodded, her face set in determination. She had never imagined her life would lead her here, running through a fortress to escape the enemy that had taken her mother. But with Marcus by her side, she felt a sense of hope she hadn't allowed herself to feel in years. He wasn't just a soldier, he was someone who cared, someone who had put his trust in her, even though it wasn't easy. In the chaos of the mission, she had begun to see Marcus as more than just a weapon. He was a protector, and he had proven it time and time again. "We're almost there," Nia whispered, looking toward the distant exit. The door at the far end of the corridor was their way out. It was a narrow path, but it was the only one that led to freedom. Suddenly, the sound of footsteps interrupted the stillness. Marcus froze, his eyes narrowing as he listened. The footsteps were faint at first, but growing louder, closer. "Stay close," Marcus said as he took a protective step in front of Nia and the Queen. His body tensed, his muscles ready for action. "Get to the door, I'll handle this." Nia's heart raced, but she trusted him. She quickly helped her mother, who was struggling to stay upright. Together, they moved toward the exit. But just as they were about to reach the door, a voice rang out, echoing through the hallway. "Stop right there!" The voice was cold and filled with authority. It was a man's voice, unmistakably the warlord S. "You think you can just walk away from my fortress? Not so fast." Marcus turned toward the voice, his face hardening. The warlord had arrived, and with him, his guards. The sound of armored soldiers marching down the hallway was unmistakable. Marcus knew there would be no escape unless he fought. He had no choice but to face them head-on. "Get to the door," Marcus shouted to Nia. "I'll hold them off." Nia's eyes met his, filled with fear and gratitude. She hesitated for a moment, but she knew she had no time to argue. With a quick nod, she grabbed her mother and pulled her toward the door, pushing it open with all her strength. The queen's footsteps were slow but determined. She was still recovering, but with Nia's help, they reached the doorway. Marcus kept his eyes on the approaching soldiers, his heart pounding. He could see them now, armed with energy rifles, their eyes locked on him. The warlord stood in the back, a cruel smile on his face. He knew he had the advantage, but Marcus wasn't going to let that stop him. "Don't think you've won, human," the warlord sneered. "You may have gotten past my men, but you won't get past me. This fortress is mine, and no one leaves without my permission." Marcus clenched his fists. His enhanced senses were alert, his instincts kicking into overdrive. He wasn't going to let anyone hurt Nia or her mother, not while he was here, not while he still had the strength to fight. "You're wrong," Marcus said calmly, his voice steady despite the rising tension. "This fortress may be yours, but it's not your people's. And I'm taking them with me." Without warning, Marcus moved. His speed was unmatched, a blur of motion that left the soldiers no time to react. He disarmed the first two with ease, knocking their rifles out of their hands and sending them crashing to the floor. The remaining soldiers hesitated, unsure of how to respond. They had been trained to fight, but they had never faced someone like Marcus, someone who was more than just a soldier. Marcus didn't wait for them to make the next move. He launched himself into the fray, his fists striking with precision. He wasn't just using his strength to overpower them. He was using his mind, calculating every move, every strike, to make sure no one got hurt unnecessarily. One soldier rushed toward him with a knife, but Marcus dodged effortlessly, grabbing the soldier's arm and twisting it behind his back. The soldier cried out in pain, but Marcus didn't stop. He slammed him into the wall, knocking him unconscious. Another soldier tried to fire his rifle, but Marcus was already on him. With a swift motion, he knocked the weapon from his hands and threw him to the ground. The warlord stood back, watching the battle unfold. His smile faded, replaced by a look of disbelief. He had underestimated Marcus. He had thought that a mere human soldier wouldn't be a match for his forces, but he was wrong. Marcus was no ordinary soldier. Finally, after a few more moments of intense fighting, the soldiers were on the ground, incapacitated but alive. Marcus stood over them, his chest heaving, his muscles aching from the fight. He was still standing, still strong. "Go," Marcus said, his voice calm but filled with urgency. "Get to the exit. I'll hold them off for as long as I can." Nia and the Queen wasted no time. With the door open, they ran, their steps echoing down the hallway as they made their way to safety. Marcus watched them go, a flicker of hope rising within him. For the first time in his life, he was fighting for something more than just survival. He was fighting for a future, for people who needed him. And that was something he never thought he would find. As Nia and her mother reached the safety of the transport ship, Marcus turned back to face the warlord, who was now glaring at him from a distance. "This isn't over," the warlord snarled. "You've only delayed the inevitable." Marcus didn't reply. He simply watched as Nia and the Queen took off into the sky. The warlord could threaten him all he wanted, but Marcus had done what he had set out to do. And now, with Nia and her mother safe, he could finally walk away from the life he had known. He had found his purpose. Marcus stood still as the warlord's forces regrouped. His breathing was steady, but his body ached from the fight. The soldiers he had knocked out were slowly coming to, their groans echoing in the empty halls. But Marcus paid them no attention. His only focus was on the exit, where Nia and her mother were now waiting, ready to leave the fortress behind. The warlord, though, had not given up. He had retreated for the moment, but it was clear that he wasn't going to let them escape so easily. Marcus walked calmly toward the door, glancing back one last time to make sure no one was following. His enhanced senses told him that the remaining soldiers were in no shape to pursue them. But the warlord, he was another story. Marcus knew that the man would stop at nothing to get what he wanted, and he wasn't about to let Nia and her mother face him alone. As he stepped outside, the sun was setting, casting long shadows across the barren landscape. The transport ship was still in the distance, but Nia and the Queen were already on board. Marcus could see them through the small window, their faces filled with relief. They had made it out of the fortress alive, but the feeling of relief didn't last long. Marcus turned to face the warlord, who was now standing at the entrance of the fortress, flanked by more of his guards. His face was a mask of anger and determination. "You think you can just walk away from me?" the warlord shouted. His voice was deep and filled with fury. "You have no idea what you've started, human." Marcus didn't reply. He didn't need to. He had done what he came to do. Now it was time to finish this. The warlord raised his hand, signaling to his soldiers. "Take him down," he ordered. "No mercy." Marcus knew there was no turning back. He had already made his choice. He had come here to protect Nia and her mother, and he wasn't going to let anything stop him now. He stepped forward, his mind focused and calm, ready for whatever the warlord threw at him. The first soldier charged at him, but Marcus was faster. With a quick move, he sidestepped and knocked the soldier to the ground. Another one tried to attack from behind, but Marcus was already on the move, twisting around and disarming him in one smooth motion. The warlord's soldiers were no match for him. His speed and strength were overwhelming. Marcus didn't hold back. He wasn't just fighting to survive anymore, he was fighting to protect the people he had come to care about. "Stay back," the warlord shouted as his remaining soldiers rushed in. "He's not just any soldier, he's a monster, you can't defeat him." But the warlord's words were nothing more than empty threats. Marcus was a force of nature, and nothing the warlord did could stop him. He moved through the soldiers like a whirlwind, taking them down one by one. His enhanced reflexes made him unstoppable, each strike landing with precision. He wasn't just fighting with his body. He was using his mind, calculating every move, predicting the soldiers' actions before they made them. The warlord, seeing his forces being defeated, finally stepped forward, his eyes burning with rage. "You think you've won?" he spat. "You're just a tool, a weapon. You were made to destroy. But you've forgotten who you really are. You'll never be anything more than a soldier." Marcus stopped for a moment, his gaze meeting the warlord's. The words stung, but Marcus didn't let them affect him. He had heard it all before, the talk of being nothing more than a weapon, a tool for destruction. But it wasn't true. He had found his purpose, and it wasn't to destroy. It was to protect. It was to fight for something greater than himself. The warlord lunged at him, his blade raised high, but Marcus was ready. In a flash, he sidestepped and disarmed the warlord, sending his weapon flying across the ground. The warlord stumbled back, shocked by how quickly Marcus had reacted. He had underestimated him. Marcus stood tall, his body still but his mind sharp. "You're wrong," he said quietly. "I'm not a weapon, I'm more than that, and I won't let you hurt them." With a single move, Marcus closed the distance between them and knocked the warlord to the ground. He stood over him, his hand raised, ready to end it. But the warlord wasn't the real enemy anymore. Marcus had come to realize that it wasn't about defeating one man, it was about protecting the future, about standing up for those who couldn't fight for themselves. "You're finished," Marcus said, his voice steady. "This ends now." The warlord didn't speak again. He lay there defeated and helpless. Marcus had won. The battle was over, and the warlord's reign of terror was finally at an end. Marcus turned and walked toward the transport ship, his heart pounding. He had done it. He had kept his promise to Nia. Her mother was safe, and they were free to leave the horrors of this planet behind. As he boarded the ship, Nia looked at him with gratitude in her eyes. "You did it," she said softly. "You saved us." Marcus nodded, but the words didn't feel necessary. He had found his purpose. It wasn't about the fight, it wasn't about the battles or the destruction. It was about protecting the people he cared about doing what was right, no matter the cost. As the ship lifted off from the surface, Marcus glanced out the window at the fortress that had once held them captive. It was in the distance now, but Marcus knew that it would never be a threat again. The warlord was gone, and his reign of fear was over. "Where will you go now?" Nia asked, her voice filled with curiosity. Marcus turned to face her, his expression thoughtful. "I don't know yet," he said, "but for the first time in my life I feel like I have a choice, I have a purpose." Nia smiled, her face filled with relief. Whatever you choose, you'll always have a place with us. Marcus felt something inside him shift. For the first time, he felt like he truly belonged. He had been a soldier, a weapon for so long, but now he was something more. He was a protector, and that was all that mattered. As the transport ship soared through the sky, Marcus knew that his journey was far from over. There would be more challenges ahead, more battles to fight. But for now, he had found his place in the world. He had found his purpose. And nothing would ever take that away from him. The stars stretched out before them as the transport ship sailed smoothly through the sky. The weight of the battle behind them, the dust and destruction left in their wake, seemed far away now. Marcus stood by the window, his hands resting at his sides, staring out at the endless space ahead. The feeling of accomplishment was there, but it was tempered by something deeper, a quiet satisfaction that he had never felt before. For the first time in his life, he wasn't just moving forward with a mission. He was moving forward with a purpose. Nia and her mother, the queen, sat nearby. Nia was tending to her mother, making sure she had everything she needed. The queen had regained some strength, but the journey ahead would be long, and she still needed rest. Her gratitude was evident every time she looked at Marcus, but there was a weight in her eyes, a weight that came from the experience of being a prisoner. Marcus could see it, but he didn't ask. They had been through enough already. "We made it," Nia said softly, breaking the silence. Her voice was filled with relief, but also with something else, something that Marcus had noticed growing between them. It was more than just gratitude. It was a bond, something that went deeper than the mission that had brought them together. Marcus turned to her. "Yeah," he replied, his voice steady but quiet. "We made it." But the truth was, there was something more that Marcus wanted to say. Something that had been stirring within him ever since they had left the fortress. He wasn't just feeling relief anymore. He wasn't just feeling the satisfaction of completing a mission. He was feeling something else, something he had never allowed himself to feel before. Hope. For years, Marcus had believed that he was just a weapon, created to destroy, created to fight. His entire life had been defined by battles, by wars, by endless combat. He had been trained to follow orders, to carry out missions without question, without hesitation. His purpose had always been clear: fight and win. But after everything that had happened, after everything he had done for Nia and her mother, he realized something. His purpose was not just to fight. It was to protect. Marcus felt a shift within him, a change he couldn't ignore. Nia's voice interrupted his thoughts again. "We still have a long way to go, Marcus," she said gently. "The warlord's allies may still come after us. We need to be prepared." Marcus nodded, his mind already working through the next steps. His training never let him rest. There was always something more to do, something more to plan. But now, even as his mind was filled with tactics and strategies, he also felt a sense of calm. He had done what he set out to do, and he had learned something valuable in the process. As the days passed, the bond between Marcus and Nia grew stronger. They spent more time talking, sharing their stories, and learning about each other. Nia was more than just a princess now. She was someone Marcus truly respected. And as he listened to her, as she shared the stories of her people, of her mother's reign, and of her dreams for the future, Marcus felt something stir within him. For the first time, he was thinking beyond the battle. He was thinking about the future. But even as they moved toward a better future, Marcus knew that danger was still out there. The warlord's allies were a constant threat. They had to keep moving, keep running, because as long as there were enemies who sought power, there would always be those willing to fight for it. Marcus stayed vigilant. He wasn't just protecting Nia and her mother anymore. He was protecting something far greater, the future that could be if they stayed strong and united. Then one night, as the ship sailed through the darkness of space, the alarms went off. Marcus was on his feet instantly, his mind already shifting into combat mode. He didn't need to ask what was happening. He knew that the warlord's allies had found them. It was only a matter of time before they would come for revenge. Nia rushed to his side. "What's happening?" she asked, her voice filled with worry. "We're being followed," Marcus replied, his voice calm, though the urgency was clear in his eyes. "Get to the back of the ship. Stay out of the way." Nia hesitated for a moment, but then nodded. She grabbed her mother's hand and led her to the rear of the ship, leaving Marcus to handle the situation. Marcus moved quickly, his mind already working through the possibilities. The ship had been designed for long travel, but it wasn't equipped for battle. They didn't have much in the way of weaponry, but what they did have was speed, and that was something Marcus could use. The enemy ship was closing in, its blip growing larger on the radar. There was no way to outrun it. The only option left was to face it head-on. Marcus made his way to the control room, his hands moving swiftly over the console. He didn't have much time, but he knew what needed to be done. He activated the ship's emergency thrusters, sending them into a rapid spin to shake off their pursuers. It was a risky move, but he had to do something to throw them off. The enemy ship followed, trying to lock onto them. It fired a warning shot, but Marcus was ready. He engaged the ship's shields, absorbing the blast and using the ship's maneuverability to get into a better position. It wasn't easy, and the ship shuddered under the stress, but Marcus didn't give up. Finally, with a quick burst of speed, he shot the ship into a sharp dive, sending them toward a nearby asteroid field. The enemy ship, unable to follow in such a tight space, slowed down, unable to keep up with the unpredictable path Marcus had taken. Marcus exhaled as the danger passed. He had done it again, he had protected them. He stood for a moment, staring at the empty space ahead. The ship was safe for now, but he knew this wouldn't be the last fight. He was prepared for that. He turned to head back to the others, but then paused. He was no longer just the soldier. He wasn't just the weapon. He was someone who had found his place in the world. When he returned to the others, Nia was there, waiting for him. Her face was filled with concern, but there was also gratitude in her eyes. "You did it," she said softly. "You saved us again." Marcus smiled, but the smile didn't quite reach his eyes. There was still work to be done. But he knew that as long as they stayed together, as long as they fought for each other, they would get through this. "We're not done yet," Marcus said, his voice steady. "But we will be, and when this is over, you and your mother can finally live in peace." Nia nodded, a look of determination settling on her face. "We'll make it through, together." As the stars stretched out before them, Marcus knew that his journey was far from over. There would be more battles, more obstacles, but he was ready. For the first time, he wasn't fighting for someone else's cause. He was fighting for the future, for something worth protecting. He had found his purpose, and nothing would take that away from him.